Hello everyone, I am Rod and I am the game design instructor for the Academy of Entertainment Arts over at Dixie Hollins High School. If you are one of my students, it's Mr. Flowers to you, and welcome to this video tutorial. Okay, welcome back. So what we're going to do here is a texture for the door. First I'm going to go to my UV panel, UV editor, and this is how my door is kind of laid out, but it's not very door-like. It's hard to tell where anything is on here and how it's relatable to anything else. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do what's called an automatic projection. It's just called automatic in 2016. So with the door selected, go to UVs, hit automatic, and we'll get these. Now what you want to do is sew all this stuff together. That way it's laid out pretty evenly and you don't have a lot of nasty seams. Otherwise, these pieces that are kind of cut will have gaps in the texture. And I can show you that by selecting this object. I'm going to right click and let's go to assign. We'll do the wood texture real quick. And it's not going to be very noticeable on here, but it's going to be noticeable enough to kind of bug me. And you can see right here how this edge does not line up with this, right? And that's kind of annoying. And on this side, same thing. The edges, where this edge kind of meets here, it doesn't meet the board there. It's kind of skewed. And that has to do where these have been sewn. They're not sewn together. And that's why it's important to correct any mistakes that your UV editor makes when it does this. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into face mode. I'm going to select the face. This is the front of the door. And you want to know which is the front and the back and all that stuff. I'm going to move this up. And I'm going to grab this one. Kind of move that up. This is the back of the door. And the way I'm going to do this is I'm going to sew using the edges. So I'm going to right click, go into edge mode. So I'm going to grab this edge. This edge. Should sew to that one. Go to the polygons tab in your UV editor. Move and sew. I'm going to double click on this. So go to UVs and just double click. It'll let you grab the whole shell. Move the shell off. And if we look, it's a lot nicer. This edge meets and flows with that edge. This edge meets and flows with that edge. And this edge cuts across here, but it meets the piece that would be there, right? So those are sewn together and that looks a lot nicer. Same deal. I'm going to do the other side. Let's do... Yeah, that's fine. Edge mode. Grab this side. Polygons. We'll do a move and sew. I think I will sew this. What it's going to have to do is flip this piece over. So move and sew. Hopefully it doesn't skew it. And it didn't. Awesome. Now I need the top polygon. Move and sew. And we're not going to actually see the top and bottom, so it's not as important, but just to be consistent. Move and sew. So we have the same kind of box layout that we had, that little cross or T-shape, except now we know this is the front of our door, this is the top, bottom, left and right of our door, and this is the back of the door. I'm going to go to UVs, select all this, polygons, go to layout, and this should lay it out on here. And it does turn it kind of cockeyed. If that drives you crazy, you can always rotate it back the other way. It doesn't really matter. because this grid is pretty square. It should be about the same. So dink, dink. So if you had to put that on, it would line up just like right there. So if you must have your door, vertical, you can rotate it and do that. And I advise, if you're going to rotate in the UV editor, to use the little steppers here. You don't always get discrete rotation. So if I hit E and I try to rotate, it doesn't rotate discretely unless you set it up in the controls. So I would just use this to rotate, so everything's nice and lined up. Let's see if I can get my layout. It's so insistent on doing that. Oh well, I'll just keep it manually done. And it's important when you line these up that you're not off the grid space. That's all I'm checking for, is I'm making sure that my UVs are not outside of the UV plane of our window space here. Okay, so now that this is laid out, I'm going to go to UVs. I'm going to select all of it. Polygons, UV snapshot. I'm going to do this as, I'll say, I probably have like a million of these floating somewhere. Wood, door, UVs. 2048 by 2048 is fine. We don't really need a lot of detail, so you can actually drop this down to like 512 by 512. But it's easier to scale resolution down than it is to scale it back up. So if you want it to be very, very pretty, I just start big. But it depends on what your graphics card can do. Mine's comfortable at 2048. I'm going to change Maya if to PNG because they're easier to work with, in my opinion. And then I will hit the OK button. And this will go to your default images folder inside of Maya. So I'm going to hit that. Alright, so inside of Maya, it's under Projects, Default, and then it'll be in the Images folder. I got a bunch of stuff in here, so I have to look. Wooden door UVs. Drag that over to Photoshop. I'll give that its own spot. So my layer 0 is going to be my UVs. My layer 1, I'm just going to make this the background. And I usually do my background as black, so I'm just going to throw that in there so I can see my UVs. And I will make a wooden door. The way I'm going to do it, you can do a doorknob if you want. You can put a handlebar on here. I did not plan for having any of that on there. I'm not going to be that fancy, but you are welcome to. What I'm going to do is I'm going to grab 2 different shades of brown. So my color tab, let me grab a light brown, and then I will grab a dark brown. I will lock both these layers so I don't accidentally mess them up. I'm going to add in a new layer. I'm going to drag it under my UVs so that I can see it. This will be my color layer. And then inside here, I'm going to go to, with my color layer selected, filter, render, go ahead and do fibers. Now, it'll probably tell me that I can't because there's no pixels there. So the first thing we want to do is clouds first. And that'll give us this. And now that we have pixels there, we can render fibers. My dark brown isn't as dark as I would like it to be. It's kind of hazy, but it's like a soft green tint in there. It drives me crazy. You can change the vibrance and the strength of your boards if you like. I'm just going to leave that like this. Okay, so here's one board, and I'm going to make this board shaped. So first things first, I'm going to go to Edit, go down to Free Transform, and now I'm going to skew this down to a board shape. I know my top board and bottom boards are going to be kind of skinny, and the middle board and everything, so I'm going to make a skinny board. That's fine. I'm going to hit the checkbox. There's one board. I will go into Filter, and then I will go into Liquify, and this will let me get some swivels and some other things on here. I'm going to hold Control, hit the plus or minus key to zoom in. Because I'm blind and I can't do this from far away. And you have a bunch of different controls up in here. The little pointer lets you kind of pull and move. You have a bloat tool, pucker, twist, bend, little wavy thing. Over here, your brush sizes. Right now my brush is kind of huge. I'm going to bring the brush size down. That's good. You also have brush strength, density, pressure, and all that good stuff you can play with as well. I'm going to grab this little wavy thing. I'm going to kind of come through and just pull to give it this natural board look. And I will do the edges, so there's some differences on the edges, so it's not perfectly flat. Because boards are never perfectly flat. No matter how good you get them, there's always some gaps and everything. Now I'm just going to work through the bottom a little bit. Again, I'll do some swirls in the middle. And subtle is better than like extreme, because you can pick out the extremes really, really easy. So being subtle with it makes it look more natural. And again, you still have your other tools. You can use your bloat tool to kind of pull that out. Maybe there's a knot there. Maybe it's on the other side. We just don't see as the fibers kind of bend. Pucker tool kind of does the opposite of that, pulls them in. And then the swirly tool does sort of like a vortex. If I were to vortex this, it would twist it. But that's a little bit too extreme, so I'm going to undo that. I'll stick with my wave tool. So I'm happy with that board. I'll hit OK. There's the first board. And what I would normally do is make each one of these different. But we're not going to actually see this one and this one and the top and the bottom in great detail. So I'm not going to worry about making these separate. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to grab my little move tool here. Well, before that, I'm going to change the shape of this. So Edit, go down to Free Transform, and using my UV layout, I'm going to drag this down to these lines here. Go down to the bottom, drag this up to those lines. And then I'll hit the checkbox. I'm going to duplicate this across. So I'm going to grab the Move tool. I'm going to hold Alt on the keyboard and just drag this out like that. To give it some variety, I will go to Edit, and I will go to Transform, and I'll just do a 180 rotation. This will flip it. I'll just rotate it 180 degrees so that the little dimples are not in the same spot. And actually, this dimple is really down here, right there, because it rotated around. Now I'm going to hold Alt on the keyboard. I will click and drag, and I got to move this board about there, and then I got to rotate it. This one I will transform and then I will rotate 90 degrees clockwise. Drag it up. And same thing, I'm going to edit, free transform, I'm just going to drag this in. Hit the checkbox. Alt on the keyboard, I will drag this down. Put this about there, and I will, even though I know I won't see this, I will just do it just for my own sanity's sake. And I'll do 90 degrees, actually I'll do a 180. Cool. So there's the outer edges of my door. Now I need the front and back. So same thing. Over here, you notice every time we created a duplicate of this, we got color copy, color copy, color copy, color copy. Well, that's not very useful. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put this into a group. If we select all of these and then hit the group button, it'll drop them all into a group. And then you can just kind of close this off and you'll see everything collapses into your group. If you're in Maya Creative Cloud, this groups automatically for you when you do that. I am not in Creative Cloud, so when I did it, it actually didn't do it for me. So I have to move these manually. I'm just going to drop them in there. But when you collapse yours, it should look like that. And I'm just going to name this, I'll do edge boards. Right there. And I'm going to make a new group. I'll call this one face boards. I will just add this one. I'll name it. I'll go ahead and do front. It's good to name these as you go. I didn't name the other ones, so if I want to go back and edit them, it's kind of a guessing game, which I hate doing. But they kind of give you an idea. If I collapse that and I open this up, if I want to know what board I'm going to move, right now they're all color, color copy, color 2, color 3. And the only way I can really tell which board it is by looking where it appears on the picture. This one appears all the way to the left, so it has to be that one. This one appears toward the middle. This one appears at the top. That one appears toward the bottom. So I could do, left board, right board, top board. Oops. Bottom board. In case you ever have to go back and edit them. Face boards, I got the front board. Same deal. I'm going to select my front board. Filter. We just have to have pixels here, so I'll do a cloud layer, and then I'll do a fibers, render fibers. And Photoshop does the fibers kind of randomly, so you get different fibers every time, which is nice. But I will go back in and, before I do my liquefy, I want to scale this so it fits this guy. Edit, free transform, pull these in, pull these ones in, pull these ones down. All these ones down. And I'm actually going to have several boards kind of across the door. It won't be one long board. So I'm going to pull this in about there. And I'm not really sure how many I need to fill this space, so I might have to resize this again. So instead of having to play like a guessing game, I'm going to hit the cancel button. Whoops. I'm going to resize this to the size of the face panel. And then I will make my boards out of that. So here's this. Hit the checkbox. Jump into liquefy. And I know I'm moving a little bit quick. I'm just trying to keep the video under a certain time, but you're welcome to pause and back up if you need to. Alright, I'm going to change my brush size. A little bit bigger. That's probably too big, but I'm trying to be a little quick. Make a little eye spot. Gotta have a knot, you know? Every board has a knot, and I'll do a pucker. Oh, that's probably too extreme, way too extreme there. My wave tool, let's grab that. And that'll be a good board. And when we make this into separate board panels, you can see that there's going to be some natural gaps, which is fine. Alright. I'm going to keep my front here because I don't know exactly how many gaps I'm going to need. So I don't want to destroy my front. I'm just going to hold Alt and just copy and drag this out of the scene. I'll just hide it there in case I want to go back to it. So for my front, I'll select my front again. Free transform. Scrunch this down. I want to get about 4 boards across. So 1 board, and then move tool, hold Alt, 2 boards. I don't want them to be in the same spot, so I will edit, transform. I'll do a 180. So when you're looking across, you don't see the same grain pattern over and over again. And then I will hold Alt, click and drag. This one has a bit more space in between it, and you can see that I have a gap for a small board. Let's do edit, transform. I'm going to do a horizontal flip, which is kind of like a 180, but it only flips it left and right. And then I'm going to go and grab my clockwise counter. Let's do one more. Yeah, so that should be, this one is that, and this one is that. But you can see I have this gap here, so I have to do some guesstimating. So let's grab, and all the boards don't have to be created equal. It's okay if there is some bigger or smaller than others. I will do, I'm going to grab board 2, which should be this copy right there. Free transform. Bring it in some. Bring this one. Remember, I'm selecting the different layer here, so I'm on board 3 now. And I'm just moving that in. And now we have a little bit of a gap, which is kind of cool. It should be just big enough to fit this board in. So I go down to my front copy 2, hold Alt, click and drag. There we go, that board fits in. And I will do a 180. Yeah, 180. That should work. So there we go. We have some boards. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to consolidate this layer. Actually, I won't consolidate the layer. If I do that, then I kind of ruin everything. What I'm going to do is I'm going to use each board as a separate piece. So inside my group, I'll make a new group called back. For our front boards, so this is a group inside of a group. Kind of put those in there. And then I will create a duplicate of this group. So let's hold Alt, just click and drag it down. until you see a line, and then you should get that one. And I'm going to put this inside that group. Oops. Put that inside this group here. Front boards copy will be backboards. I'll open up my backboards. And if I hold this group, if I just select the group and then grab my arrow and just pull these, it moves the entire group over, which is really nice. And everything should snap into place. Our boards are a little bit long because we did skew some of this stuff, but that should be fine. Copy it all the way across. If you wanted to create a bump map for this, you're welcome to follow the tutorial on doing the bump map. I don't think I'm going to do one, just because they can be a headache to implement. I'll probably just do it off. Sure, why not? Why not? We have enough time to do a bump map. But in the classroom, we don't have the normal map technology, so we won't be able to do that. I'm going to turn the UVs off. I no longer need them. And I'm going to I have to create a duplicate of these. So I'm going to select those, pull them down to duplicate. Remember, hold Alt when you do that. I'm going to turn the top two off. I'm going to have these two selected. I'm going to right click and merge those layers into a flattened layer. Okay, so this is now just a flat layer. And I'm going to name this bump. And this has to be a grayscale. Bump maps need to be a grayscale. Just keep that in mind. Because it uses the light and dark values to create peaks and valleys. So we're going to go up to Image, Adjustments, and I'm not going to set the mode to grayscale because that would flatten all of my color. I'm just going to go to Adjustments and go to Black and White, and that will just change this image to a black and white, like that. Now I have to push up the levels so that I can get a nice crisp image. So Image, Adjustments, Levels. And then on this bell curve here, if I pull up the darks, it'll darken everything. If I pull up the lights, it'll lighten everything. So I'm going to get my lights as bright as I can get them without flattening the image. So this bleaches it out and it's flat. But if I come up to just like a medium gray, that's probably good. And I'll bring the darks in. And you can really see how the boards, little striations in the boards are coming out. And that's probably good right there. Now you don't want to leave this just as it is because these are going to be too sharp and you're going to see really sharp spikes kind of sticking out of your boards. You don't want that. So I'm going to put a blur onto this to help soften the edges a little. So Filter, go down to Blur, and I'm just going to do I'll do a Gaussian blur. That way I can control the percentage. And you can see this is the space between a board. You can see how kind of fuzzy it got. 9.7 is probably high. Let me do 5. Try 3. 3 should be good. It's soft enough in the middle, but the edges aren't very sharp. That'll probably work. So I need both of these to be saved out. So I will File. I'm going to save this to my game design folder. And then inside my texture references folder. First things first, I'm going to save the UV, so this can, or the PSD. So this can be a wooden door. Since this is a texture map, I need to say that it is a texture map. If I don't say that, then I'm just going to think it's a texture, and I can use it on anything. Texture maps are specifically mapped to a texture layout or a UV layout. So the PSD first, and then I will save the Targa. Okay. And this is going to be a wooden door. And since I know this is going to be the bump map, I'm going to do an underscore and put B for bump. And 24 bits is fine. 32 means we have an alpha channel, which we do not, so 24 bits is what you want. And I will turn my bump off, and I will turn my other two board layers on. File, save as. And this is going to be my colored channel. The colored channel is just your diffuse channel. So Targa. And I'm going to go in here just after my texture map, underscore D for diffuse. Again, 24 bits is fine. Hit OK. And if I jump back into Maya, grab my door, I'm going to go down to Assign Existing Material. I'm going to go to my door texture. Right now it's just a flat Lambert, so I'm going to right-click on the door texture, Material Attributes. And that should bring up my Attributes window. Hit the little checker box. Go find your file. And this is going to be my door texture. I didn't give it a prefix, so now I have to look for it. This is why I put the prefix, so T for texture, M for material. I did not prefix it, so I have to dig, but it's at the bottom. Wooden door, open. So there's the door texture kind of applied. And you can't see any of the bumping happening. So what I got to do is come up to where are you on 2016? There's a little tab here. This brings us back to our texture. We actually have a bump mapping option. And I'm going to hit the little checker box, File, and it'll bring us here to a bump to 2D1. And it really wants a file to load, so I'm going to click the little arrow. And I'm just going to grab that. Where are you? And grab the bump map, add that on, and you can see that pushing out automatically. See the depth? So even though it's going to be very subtle, you'll be able to catch it when we render this with the lighting being the way it will be. We'll be able to see some of this depth from a distance. So this is kind of extreme. This is really a plasticky bump map. But we can control some of those values. Like if I were to go right back to Material Attributes and have my door texture, we should be able to click on the little arrow. Once you're inside of here, if you don't see the bump offset, I just hit the arrow and it brings us right into here. But you have a bump value. You have a depth value slider, and you have a value slider. And you can kind of manipulate these to see your options. I'm going to pull this down, and you can see how my depth, if I pull it up, and how the boards kind of get crinkly. And you can push this out really extreme, or you can kind of bring it down. 0.5 looks like it'll be spot on. So it'll give our eye enough visual without being too plastic looking. Alright, so that's that one. Same thing for my brick texture. I didn't add the bump map. And actually this is way too shiny. I should do a specular map, but I don't think I'm going to do one just yet. Let me go into materials. Before I move on. Specular shading. And you can see the shininess of it. Let's see what we got here. Let me drop off reflectivity. Let's drop that down some. It shouldn't be too reflective. It should just be subtle. Like I don't want to pan and see it whiting out. Like right here, this black should never white out. That should never reflect. So that would be a specular map. We would have to go in and run this on a specular map. Let's see what eccentricity does. You should be able to, yeah, that'll work. Oh well, let's see how my roll off goes. We'll pull that down. So a little bit of shine on the wood is fine. I just don't want it to be glossy. I want to set up the specular or the bump map for our brick texture. So I'm going to right click on the brick, material attributes, and go into the brick. That's weird. Bump offset, file, and my brick texture, red brick texture, bump map. Put that on there. Now, if it jumps like this, the reason has to do with the location of the bump map. So the first thing, we want to go into the place 2D texture 5. And remember we did 10 by 10. So 10. And then repeat 10. So now it lines up, but it's still too extreme. It's way too strong. So I'm going to go back to my file 5, and I will hit the little arrow, and then I have my depth control. So I'm going to bring this down. And you can see the results that you get right here with it set into a negative value. It's actually popping out a lot nicer. But it really what this does, it controls the way the light hits it. So so from this angle, it'll probably look, yeah. So I have mine set to a depth of negative 0.037, and that gives me a decent result without it being too much. That's the brick. And let me do the wooden floor. Grab the wood floor, right click, material attributes, go into your bump map settings, hit the little box, load in the bump map file. If your file doesn't load up, just hit the arrow and grab the file. And T_wood floor bump. And again, we have to adjust our settings. So place 2D texture. What do we do? 10 by 5, I think is what we did. 10 by 5. And then we need to rotate 64. So there's the rotation. Everything lines up, but it is quite extreme. So I'm going to go back to file 6, hit my little arrow, and I'm going to bring the depth down. That's probably too strong. Kind of like that looks good. 0.08 I think looks good on my map. But again, we have the extra shiny, so we'll have to come in and do some adjustments on that. So right click, material attributes, come down to our specular. And I want to see, because I am going to eventually put light on this, but I want to see how it's reflective. So I'm going to pan up to where I get some reflection. I'm going to dial these down some till I'm happy with my results. Again, we don't want it to be too plasticky. We just want a little bit of sheen. That's probably good enough. All right. So I'm going to stop the video here. Next video we will add the curtain and do our props.